got such a huge crowd here tonight. This is our regular meeting for ANC 34G, and I want to welcome everyone who's on the video, who's watching the video as well. As we did last meeting, we're going to take a few minutes at the beginning to describe a few things about the ANC for those people who aren't familiar. We meet every second and fourth Monday of each month, except for August, and we won't have any meetings in August. We're elected officials for 2-year terms. Each of us represents about 2,000 people, and so the whole commission represents about 15,000 people in the Chevy Chase, Barnaby Woods, and Hawthorne neighborhoods. We're all volunteers. We don't receive any compensation for what we do, and we also end up spending a lot more time than just the time in these meetings. We're frequently emailing or telephone calls, other kinds of communications with constituents or with each other. There's a lot of time that goes into this process. We don't have authority to do anything other than advise the government of the District of Columbia. We can advise particular agencies or the council or the mayor. We can advise them about a wide range of issues that range from traffic issues to parking issues to public space use to virtually anything that comes up in the neighborhood. I want to also introduce Alan Beach and Stephanie Van Pelt. They are assistants in our office. Alan was a commissioner for many decades and has continued to help us out. Stephanie's our office manager, and they will have some functions during the meetings as well. We have a number of norms that we have for our meetings, and those are listed at the bottom of the agenda that's on every chair. Just to go over them briefly, we ask all the speakers to speak from the podium, and this will ensure that everybody gets recorded. Participants are to speak only one at a time. Meetings follow our agenda, although we might vary that depending on how things move ahead. Generally, after we have a presentation, the commissioners ask questions and then the audience may ask questions. Every resident will be heard once before we have anyone who speaks twice. Some issues may provoke some commotion, and if we start deviating from these norms, then I'll try to remind everyone again what we're doing. Also, we have a speaker's sign-up sheet in the back. I don't think anybody's here is going to sign up for anything right now, but that's available when people start arriving. I suspect people will be coming late tonight. So I'll introduce the commissioners first. Becky, you want to start?
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Mann. I have 34G04, which includes Lafayette Park and Lafayette School. Basically goes from Utah to Broad Branch, Tennyson to Nebraska.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dan Bradfield. I represent 3G06, which is district on the western side of Connecticut Avenue, Chevy Chase, down to Chevy Chase Park, Military, and Echo.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize for running behind today. As usual, multitasking. But thank you for coming out this evening. I'm Shandon Tuck Garfield, and I represent ANC 3G02, which is on the side of the district that's closest to Rock Creek Park. Thank you for coming tonight.
Good evening, my name is Abraham Clayman, and I represent Hawthorne and part of Barnaby Woods, which is ANC 34G01.
Hello, I'm Jerry Malix. I represent 3G05. I'll take the eastern side of Connecticut Avenue from Chevy Chase Circle down to Military and across to Broad Branch.
I neglected to introduce myself. I'm Randy Speck. I represent ANC 3G03, and that's the area between Nebraska and Utah and down to Broad Branch. All right, the first item tonight is to adopt the agenda, which has been posted on our community listserv as well as other listservs and on our website. Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda? All those in favor of adopting the agenda? 6-0. I should have mentioned earlier, we do have a quorum. We have to have 4 commissioners here before we can take official actions, and we have 6 commissioners tonight, so we have a quorum. Only Chris Romaludi, who is out of town, is not here. All right, I have a couple of announcements first, and in Chris's absence, I'm really speaking on his behalf here too. On July 8th, the Department of General Services notified the Commission that Bell Architects will be the design contractor for the Chevy Chase Community Center modernization. We're very happy that this has finally happened. It's about 5 months after the original schedule. DGS has not yet finalized the contract, however, and so there hasn't been a notice to proceed, and we're not sure exactly when that will occur. It's probably going to be about 4 to 6 weeks before we'll actually be able to get started working with the new architect. Commissioner Fromboludi is working with Brent Cisco, who is the point person for the Department of Parks and Recreation, to set a date in early September when we can have the first community meeting on the design contract with the design contractor and begin the process of developing the design. The Commission has created 2 task forces to work on the community center. One is headed by Commissioner Fromboludi, which is focusing on the design, and he has organized that task force with some who are committed to working on it, and they're probably going to start meeting sometime in September. I will also head a construction logistics task force that will focus on the issues related to disruption of the neighborhood during construction, basically how we can minimize that disruption during construction. And we'll also hold an organizational meeting sometime in September. The second announcement I have is with regard to the 2nd District Metropolitan Police Department Awards Banquet, and this is an annual event that's been going on for a number of years. It's an opportunity for the community to give our thanks to police officers who have done particularly outstanding work, police officers and staff who've done outstanding work in the last year. The banquet is going to be held this year on September 26th. It's at 6:30 at Maggiano's. That's 5333 Wisconsin Avenue. This is entirely supported by the community. And so there's a charge, $50 per person for a ticket to the banquet. But a lot of people in the community have banded together and paid for some of the officers as well. $400 you can buy a table for officers and their families to come to the banquet, or you can bring yourself and your friends as well. And you can contact Samantha Nolan. You can send a check to her for any tickets that you want. The address is 2940 Northampton Street Northwest. Or you may purchase tickets on Eventbrite, and that email link will be in our minutes. Okay, that's the only announcements I have. Becky, any announcements? Okay, it's a quiet summer. All right, is Michelle Garcia here? Oh, I don't see anyone that looks like that. She was with the Mayor's Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, and she was going to talk to us about her office's work, but I don't see her here. Okay, Jessica, you have any announcements to make? Okay. All right, and our guest of honor is not yet here. I assume he is coming?
He said he was.
Okay.
I had to step outside and call him really quickly.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda and just come back to Davis Kennedy's tribute. Okay, the next item on our agenda. Yes, Abe. Oh yeah, we can do that, since nobody else is here. That would make perfect sense. Very good suggestion, Dave, thank you. Just by way of background, and why we asked Andy Reese to join us today, there was an article on July 3rd in the Washington Post that reported that the District Department of Disability Services, and Andy Reese is the director of that department, has decided not to renew Georgetown University's hospital's contract to provide services to those with intellectual and developmental disabilities who require hospitalization. And according to the Post article, the hospital staff handles 4,000 consultations a year and has helped reduce hospital stays from an average of 14 days to 6 days. The contract has been in place for about 14 years and supports a team that includes a physician, 2 nurses, 2 psychologists, 2 home visitors, a public health analyst, and a health educator. And this contract is set to expire August 31st. And we invited Andy Reese to join us tonight to explain the decision to terminate the contract and to describe how these important services for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be provided in the future. So welcome, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the opportunity to come this evening. I was a little concerned with the way things were presented in the Post, in that through Georgetown, we've had a number of different services. And just to be clear, Georgetown had a contract that was a 1-year base with 4 option years, which was coming to the end at the end of August 2019. So it isn't that there was a decision to terminate or not extend. If we were going to continue with them, there would have had to have been a solicitation, which then could have been awarded competitively. There's a number of different services in that contract. One of them, you talked about the home visitors. Georgetown helped us to develop a parenting service, which has now included many of the people. The Department on Disability Services provides supports for about 2,400 people with intellectual disabilities in the district, and about 1,800 of those receive supports through our home and community-based services waiver. And so within that waiver, we developed a service for the home visiting service to provide parenting supports. Georgetown helped us to develop that, and it became part of our waiver in 2017. It has not been a secret that we would be phasing out Georgetown in providing that service as it became part of the waiver. As part of the waiver, we get a 70% federal match for the provision of that service. So that was sort of a good, it's part of expanding the services that we provide in the waiver. So people have talked about some retrenchment on our part regarding, we had a very long-standing class action suit, but one of the things that was identified by the judge as that suit closed out 2.5 years ago was the difference that was made in our services by implementation of waiver services, and we've really expanded those. Included in our, so we had a renewed waiver in November 2017, and included in that we made some changes to our wellness services, which includes the sexuality education that's provided by Georgetown. And this allows us to, for one, people can self-refer to the service, which was a change, and we expanded the pool of providers that provide that service. And so between those two services, we feel that we have an adequate pool of people who can provide those services. In addition, DC Health has a grant to Georgetown. They are testing out an evidence-based practice for parenting of young children. And so some of the people who are supported currently by us who are with Georgetown are actually going to continue with Georgetown through the DC Health grant. We do have, when they talked about all of the touches, so part of what Georgetown's contract was to develop online training. So every single new nurse that goes on and does any training online is a touch. All of those trainings, we met with Georgetown a couple of weeks ago to talk about ownership and location of that website and where all of those online trainings would reside. That nurse who provides the training will actually be part of our staff beginning August 5th. So in terms of the health promotion and the dissemination of best practice, that's I would say, very well covered. The issue regarding consultations for people with complex health needs. We have a doctor who, in contracting to have that service continue with the expiration of Georgetown's contract, we looked at our experience over the last year. The doctor works on average about 6 hours a week doing consultation for us for people who are either in the hospital, in some long-term and acute care centers. And so we are continuing that service. We have another doctor who has experience working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, has training here in DC in that area. He graduated from Howard and did his postdoctoral work at Georgetown University, so they're also familiar with him. And we have a nurse on staff who has been doing transit. So the transition that the nurse at Georgetown currently does, which is, when we looked at it, it looked like about 20 hours per week, is for people who are in our placements. And so we also have a number of people who live at home, and we've always had a nurse on staff who does discharge planning with those folks. So what we're doing is realigning her responsibility so that she'll handle all discharge planning. So trauma-informed care was another area that the Georgetown contract covers, and one of the issues that we recognize and that's really vital in terms of the services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is that when you look at the research, often it says about 70% of people with disabilities have some issue of trauma or abuse. And so it really is an issue that we need to be aware of in working with people. Some of the folks that we support are really vulnerable, some don't communicate using words, and so being able to really provide services that's aware of the potential trauma in their life and is responsive to that is essential. And so we had awarded a contract in April for a national company that's based here in the area, but does work nationally, is really well known nationally, doing person-centered thinking practices, and they've brought on a national, actually an international expert. She's also consulted in Canada, who is from this area, who's a psychologist that graduated from the University of Maryland in College Park, who has extensive experience. She's worked at the ARC for a number of years, has extensive experience not only providing direct trauma therapy to people with intellectual disabilities, but also extensive training. And so what they're doing with us is really unique in the country, is that they're taking what are our person-centered practices and trying to integrate into that the trauma-informed care. So while it is accurate that the Georgetown contract is ending, none of the services provided to people supported by us are ending. It has been a number of years. Georgetown was a vital part of really helping us stand up a system that's a model in the country. It's actually wonderful when I go to national conferences, I get to hear, because you often, it's at home where they're the last to realize it, but you get to hear when you go to national conferences that the district is really on the cutting edge in terms of best practices. And so, we recognize the role that Georgetown played in helping us get there. And Georgetown does have the Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and we expect to continue working with them. There have been opportunities this year that they could put in a proposal and continue to contract with us. We have National Core Indicators, which is a survey that's done every year that evaluates sort of the progress of our system in relation to other states. We'll have other solicitations going out in the fall, so we certainly hope to continue to work with the USED, and we'll continue to make them aware of opportunities where they could put in proposals. But as I say, one of my biggest concerns is as the article came out that many people had the idea that there was some service they were losing. There are no services for people we support that are ending. I do have our transition plan, which is online, so if people would like copies, I can provide it.
That's great. That's a very good presentation, Andy, and we really appreciate it, because obviously there were questions that were raised as a result of the article. Have you thought about doing something in the Post, for instance, in the Metro section on Sundays? They have a place for op-eds, local op-eds I think it would be helpful to have this kind of information get out to people more so that they recognize that these services are going to continue. They're just going to be provided differently.
We have been looking at a communication strategy because clearly we're behind in terms of helping people be aware. We've been doing a lot of communication with the people we support so that they're aware, but a broader communication strategy given that this went out to the whole community. I think that's a very good idea.
Others have questions or comments? Jerry?
First, thanks for coming. Appreciate that. And the initial story that was in the Post on July 3rd that Randy mentioned, there was a follow-up story on July 13th. And that mentioned a couple of things. One, that this past Friday, they were expecting a plan to come out. Is this the plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And it also mentioned that tomorrow there's going to be a public roundtable, council on this. Is that still?
That's correct. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Okay. And the last question I have, in the Georgetown contract, the 9 people that it indicated that were part of the contract, those people were dedicated people to that contract. Are these people that are replacing them also dedicated to this particular sector?
Oh, absolutely. So like I said, I mean, the doctor that's taking over is a doctor who previously worked for one of the provider agencies that supports people that we work with. The other are waiver providers who are actually a number of our provider agencies. So they're all, and the benefit as well is that one contract is with a certified business enterprise in the district, so the district always likes when it's able to contract with businesses that are located here in the district.
Do you have any expectation when it's going to happen tomorrow at the meeting?
Did you say what is going to happen?
No, I said, do you have any expectations as to what might happen at the meeting tomorrow?
I have a lot of expectations. I've heard from a number of people whose names I've seen there that plan to testify, so I've heard what their views are. I think the most important thing is going to be just continuing forward to work with folks to make sure that, one of the challenges, what is included here is the dissemination of best practice. And that's providing supports to our providers. And so providers are just nervous about that. I think that they will be relieved when they know that the person who has been doing it will be the same person doing it going forward. That'll be my hope. It's a change for them. It's a support they relied upon. And so...
That is a good thing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I'm relatively ignorant about this, honestly, and so I just was curious if you could explain this waiver, how that works. So it seems like that is then a part of the department's program.
Correct. And so the waiver is when they waive some of the rules in Medicaid where we're able to provide sort of more comprehensive services to people who are Medicaid recipients who require health supports. So we have an intellectual and developmental disabilities waiver in the district, which provides 25 different services to people who live in the community. They're in community-based settings, and they require supports from nursing at home, supported employment services. It's a whole range of services, and it's broader than the services that are provided under what's called state plan Medicaid.
So typically Medicaid would provide some level of services, but you require this waiver to broaden the type of services.
The waiver is sort of a more flexible approach to providing services to people.
And Georgetown has helped the department to broaden that even further, it sounds like, over the years of this contract. Is that correct?
Well, as we were developing services in the waiver, they helped us because, for example, the parenting service, it was a pilot program. And so the UCED, University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, one of their roles in providing direct service is to do model programs. And so the idea is that they're sort of an incubator, that they try something out, and then we implement it. And so that's exactly what occurred in this case, is that they implemented a parenting program that was actually one that was in place. They picked up from another agency, implemented it, and then we looked at what worked and put that into our rules for our waiver so that we could implement it across the waiver.
And so some of the provided, those would be ending. And what you're saying is that services the department provides and Georgetown has helped you provide will continue as part of the department's.
That's correct. And you know, some of what they were describing in the article, one of the things that I'll walk through in my testimony tomorrow is the process when people are in the hospital. Georgetown is an added extra. We just had someone join our staff from another state. And when we were describing what Georgetown does, she was a little puzzled, saying, but don't you have provider nurses? Don't you have nurses on staff? Don't you have service coordinators here? And we said, yes, but this is sort of a quality measure on top of that, because we do have, when I was looking at sort of what services had been provided under this contract, and I went in and looked at where Georgetown had been involved with their doctor or their nurse who does transitions, there were also notes from our service coordination. We have a staff of nurses who then go out and check when the person goes home to make sure that they're following through. And the staff from the home where the person lives. We have people who are called direct support professionals who are trained to work with the person that they work with. And so when a person is in the hospital, the challenge that you can have sometimes is it's being paid by Medicaid. You can't bill Medicaid for two different services at the same time. And so once they're in the hospital, we can't bill for waiver services because their whole day is being billed to Medicaid. So we will at times, when it's requested, use local funds to ensure that the person who knows them best is in the hospital, can help them communicate. So, you know, all of those services are provided in our system, and then Georgetown has been sort of a check on top of that, and that check on top of it will continue.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming. This is definitely very informative, and it's good to have you here to talk about it. I briefly only knew a little bit about it just from the article, and it's good to see that you put together this, I guess, one document that would summarize it. What I'm wondering is, it sounds like from this that the district has taken it upon itself to expand internally what it is going to do in terms of these services. Like I know from this, it's great, you put it, there's a dedicated position, there's a dedicated nurse educator, and now you hire 2 subject matter experts.
So the physician is not an internal hire. That's done through contract with Motir, which is the certified business enterprise in the district.
So from that, you're saying that you're utilizing that for the physician resources. Is your goal to have the district centralized with the ANC? Not that you don't have that expertise, because you are the expert, but instead of relying on one facility such as Georgetown, you now want to expand upon that. And if I know what I read here, you're going to begin to have monthly roundtables, various reviews. So you're basically, is that correct in terms of what you're doing?
Yes, that is, particularly for the parenting service and wellness services. You know, rather than having one agency provided, people now have a choice of 7 different agencies, and for the parenting it's provided in 2 different ways. So essentially you have sort of 14 choices of how to get those services through our waiver. Because there's a peer-to-peer, parent-to-parent program that provides parenting support as well as a professional. And so our 7 providers, each of them have qualified staff that provide in each of those different ways.
And then along those lines, since you do work with a lot of the younger population, are you partnering with the school system to make sure that parents are aware of the changes and how it's implemented, and not only the school system but other agencies?
So within the Developmental Disabilities Administration, the partnership with the schools is less because we generally start providing services once the school system stops. So when a child or a young person is in school, because they remain until they turn 22. So when they're in school, those services are paid for by them or by health services for children with special needs. And then they transition to us. So we do have one person who works with the schools to help with planning transition. DDS also has the Rehabilitation Services Administration that works closely with schools. We do a lot of work in transition, and we do closely work with the schools. So we do a lot of work with the schools, but not with the Developmental Disabilities Administration quite as much.
So thank you very much. This is very informative, and I really like the idea of this. And then one last thing. You mentioned that there's a program manager. You have her email. Does she have direct contact in case someone may be listening? And because we do post this as well as on our YouTube. If there's not a phone number, is there a direct website where they'll get all this information?
Well, you can go to our website, which is dds.dc.gov.
Okay. So if they can't, I see she has an email. Most people do email these days, but just in case that's one.
Right, and on the front page of our website, there's a tab for Ask the Director, so those come immediately to me, and I will assign them appropriately.
DDA stand for?
Sorry, Developmental Disabilities Administration. The Department on Disability Services has essentially two service administrations, the Developmental Disabilities Administration, which provides supports to people with intellectual disabilities, and the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which provides supports to all people with disabilities to help them get employment.
One last question. Tomorrow's roundtable, is that in Councilmember Gray's committee?
No, it's the Council of the Whole and the Committee of the Whole and the Committee on Human Services.
Okay.
We're before the Committee on Human Services, not the Health
Okay,
Committee.
got it. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your coming out. All right. Let's then go back to the item. I assume Dave's coming?
He didn't, his phone disconnected all of a sudden.
Okay.
I just sent an email. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. And Dan, if you can get in touch with Tim, you might want to let him know to come earlier if you want. Be able to fit him in.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a discussion about the comprehensive plan. And this goes back to a year ago last spring, in March 2018, when, before that, the Office of Planning presented a framework element for the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, for those who aren't familiar with it, is basically a 20-year projection for what the District of Columbia is going to look like over that time period, and a description of what kinds of development we would expect and would like to have over that time. And there, in addition to the framework element, there are very specific maps for locations in the district, as well as plans that are much more specific to neighborhoods rather than for the district as a whole. But the framework element from the Office of Planning was intended to provide the overview and the big picture for what we want to do in the district over the next 20 years. And when that came out, there was some substantial changes from the prior comprehensive plans. And we have focused in our testimony at the council, and this was before the Committee of the Whole, we focused on two specific kinds of problems that we saw with the proposal from the Office of Planning. First, it was that it relied on vague or inconsistent prediction models and assumptions that resulted in unreliable and we thought biased population growth conclusions. Their expectation, they said in the framework element, was that the population of the District of Columbia would increase to about 990,000 by 2045. And it was basically premised on the proposition that all available development would occur without regard to any of the other constraints that might apply to population growth. The second point that we were concerned about was that it abandoned a lot of the certainty that had been present in prior comprehensive plans and created what we saw as unacceptable ambiguity would really hurt residents in the long term. It would not provide really the kind of certainty that was necessary for a comprehensive plan like this. The council has now considered a new version of the framework element. This has been drafted by the staff at the council in cooperation with the Office of Planning. And it contains a large number of changes and modifications from the draft that had been originally submitted by the Office of Planning. And that was presented on, I think it was July 2nd, and then they voted on it a week later. There were a couple of amendments that were considered, and then they voted and passed it on first reading. That was really not enough time for everyone to even comprehend what the changes were and what implications they might have from those changes. But a second vote is going to be held in September, probably sometime in September, and that gives ANCs and others, anyone who has an interest, an opportunity to comment and to urge the council to make further changes if we think that's appropriate. Now, looking at the revisions, and I can't say that I'm an expert in them at all because it's lengthy and there are a lot of details, but the revisions do provide a greater level of certainty. That is exactly what our commission recommended, and we commend the council for making those changes. The resolution that we're considering, though, for advising the council further, addresses really that second point, the first point that we made previously, which has not been modified, and that is the projection of a population growth to almost 1 million people by 2045. The concern that we have, I think, is that the impact of such an expansion is going to substantially increase the requirements for other infrastructure in the district, and specifically things like schools, parks, libraries, recreation centers, transportation infrastructures, developmental services for everybody. Everything is going to require many more resources, and I don't think certainly the framework element of the comprehensive plan doesn't address that at all, and leaves it completely unplanned. And so what I proposed in this draft of resolution is that we advise the council that we think it would be inappropriate to rely on a very substantial expansion in population without also addressing the key issues of what are you going to do about schools, what are you going to do about transportation infrastructure, what are you going to do about libraries and community centers and parks and all those other things that make the district a great place to live. And either the lack of that planning will constrain the population growth, so in fact you don't get that many people because they don't want to come and live here anymore, or it's just not going to, it's going to affect the quality of life. If there are 1 million people here and we have the same level of infrastructure that we have now, it's going to be impossible to live here in the way that we would like. So anyway, that's what we're proposing to the council. Commissioners want to have any thoughts or comments about that? Jerry?
I think it's great. I think we really need to address those things. I would just like us to specifically add libraries and community centers to that paragraph 5.
I do have. I did add those.
I don't see them.
You've got an old version. The one that I have prepared, I'll just read to you what it says. Yeah, that's the old version. I circulated the newer version, I think. But what it says now is, if the council truly expects a 40% increase in population by 2045, the commission urges the council to include in the framework element provisions for commensurate increases in available schools, parks, libraries, recreation centers, and the transportation infrastructure.
Community centers.
Community, recreation and community centers. Okay.
Let's not give them an out that we
Yeah.
got some.
I've always been puzzled by the distinction between a recreation center and a community center. They serve a lot of the same functions. I mean, if you were here an hour and a half ago, you would have seen gymnastics in here, which is certainly recreation. Okay, any other comments? I'll move that we adopt this resolution then and communicate it to the council.
Second.
All those in favor? 6-0. Okay, thanks. And I saw Tim come in.
Yeah.
You'll be up, Tim.
You're up, Tim.
Okay. Dan?
Sure. This is regarding alcohol beverage regulation, reissuance of C-Class restaurant. It's Opera 106151. It's for Arucola Restaurant, DBA, Crab. What are we doing?
We are, so the LLC that owned or purchased Arucola is 5534 Connecticut LLC. That LLC is still in place. Trading as is what we're going through right now. So we'll be trading as Capital Crab and Seafood.
Gotcha.
And that's where we are right now.
And so Tim Walsh is here.
Tim Walsh is here, yes. First, let me say sorry about
Tim Walsh is here.
2 weeks ago.
To,
We just got
say a few words and tell us about your, what's
all right.
going on. And
So, you know, we closed Arucola back in April of this year and just started the renovation, really, and some licensing things that we had to get done. And we ordered furniture that took 14 weeks rather than 8 weeks. And the artwork finally got in today, and it took 10 instead of 4. So just things obviously get a little prolonged. But we are a seafood house. Right now we are selling crabs. It would be the majority of the, the highlighted seafood that we're selling, and we'll sell that through October. We'll bring in more oysters, September, October, November, December, January. And then as that sunsets, we'll be bringing in crawfish, January, February, March. And then that sunsets back into crabs. So those would be like the highlighted seafood that we're selling, but we have 5 fish on the menu. We kept Javier, the executive chef, from Arucola, so we're gonna have pasta in-house made daily, lobster ravioli, clams and mussels, linguine, things like that in the fall, winter, spring, but primarily in the summertime it is to sell crabs because they are a perishable good. And we bring in fresh seafood daily. So that's the concept of what we're doing.
any questions?
I've got a couple. Tim, is the liquor license now in the name of Arugula? Or
It is 5534 in the LLC. So we had to renew that first. We were trying to transfer the license into Capital Crab, but my attorney is very busy and we didn't get that stuff filed in time. So he said, this is what we're going to do. We keep it. We changed the trading as 5534 trading as Capital Crab. Now we are getting a TORPA, I think it's called. It's a temporary licensing through Abra. A TORP.
you know anything about this? No.
It's what we did. It's what we did when we took over Arucola.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we still own it as 5534. That's the LLC that owns it. It's just we're working on the trading ads, and we'll eventually get rid of the 5534, and it will just be a Capital Crab and Seafood. So we will go through another substantial change here in the next 6 months.
Having been to many crab houses over the years, I know that they produce a lot of crab shells. And do those present a different kind of concern about trash and pickup of trash?
We are 6 days a week right now getting the trash. The biggest issue would be is smell. So what we do is, you know, you get the dumpster here and things like that, but you just have to be on top of cleaning it. We do. And then that's ultimately going to attract flies, but then you mask it as best you can. But we're on top of it, I believe.
That seems to be the only qualitative difference that was
Sure.
out there between the previous license and the current license.
Yeah, the smell, or that would be it. I mean, we do have an issue over there. We have upped our pest and road contracts a little bit more over there. I think once whatever's going on with the diner, that comes to light, we'll have another little bit of an issue, but, we just got to stay on top of it.
Right.
And until that gets rectified, we're just in defense mode.
Are all the hours staying the same?
Hours are staying the same, yeah. Yep.
The only comment I had was exactly what he said. I've heard no opposition, but I have heard a couple of comments regarding the smell.
We have to deal with, I don't know if it's trash, the amount of trash that is quicker. We just need to keep that.
100%. If I can figure out with our trash pickup, some days we pick up
At 6 a.m., some days they pick up at 4. So that trash is baking. And we put the cure on it every night to mask that smell. But sometimes if it's 100 degrees outside, there's really nothing I can do except go pour like bleach in there, which I really don't think is the right response to that. But,
Okay. And I'm going to have everybody come up to the microphone.
My question is, Mr. Chairman, are we going to have a memorandum of understanding or a settlement agreement with this establishment like we have with several others on Connecticut Avenue?
So you're thinking that we need something in addition about the trash pickup and
Whatever the conditions we've had with others.
right.
you mean a voluntary agreement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Settlement agreement.
He already has. We've been through this. Yes, basically an MOU for nearly the identical MOU.
Sure.
And quite frankly, yes, we could throw it
Yeah.
out here and
Yeah.
actually make this very simple.
I have no problem.
Right.
It's
Well,
only
attached.
beneficial to me to have the trash pickup and everything that is required of me.
Yeah. We already have one with, remember, the Avenue, which is Tim's establishment as well, which we have an MOU. So the MOU can be identical. And
Absolutely.
then, you and I can go through that, get it
Sure.
signed, but in
Not
the
a problem.
meantime, or in addition to, I would recommend that we support and we move forward with this to get this to Abra, and we'll attach the MOU signed by Tim and I.
Sounds good to me.
Well, I just had an hour question. Can you refresh my memory on the hours where it's exactly for the Class C? I can't remember.
The maximum?
Well, just well, I remember what the maximum is, but are there any changes? Are you requesting the maximum? I didn't have that in my packet.
Yeah, here are the hours right there.
Okay. Oh,
And we
okay.
keep the, and these hours would be in the MOU.
Okay, so it's just basic like 10:30 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we actually closed a little bit earlier than that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? 6-0. Okay.
Thank you.
Again, I apologize for 2 weeks ago, but
I'll shoot you the MOU in the morning and then.
okay. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jim.
it. Absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Okay. The last item, the last substantive item on our agenda, we're zipping through things quickly here, is a discussion and possible vote on a resolution for urging the Department of Parks and Rec and the Department of General Services to proceed with modernization of the rec center. Becky, you want to introduce that?
I guess everyone's on vacation today. Yeah. So as people know that they're aware, we have a rec center modernization in Lafayette Park. And this project has been going on for almost 2 years now. The first meeting was held in October of 2017. And then the project was kind of put on a semi-hold while they did a survey to the community about what people wanted. So after the survey, the project came back to the community and they presented a design. There's $4.6 million allocated for the project. So in January 2018, survey results were presented to the community, and they came back in July 2018 with an initial concept based on the survey and community input. The project has changed kind of drastically from the beginning. It was originally 3,500 square feet. It's now about 2,500 square feet. Yeah. So the community wanted a small building. They didn't like the initial design, so it's been modified. After the design was there, stormwater issues. As everyone knows, there's stormwater issues in the park, and that was one of the major concerns with the community, that no matter what we do, even though the stormwater issue with the project is mandated, the rest of the park had no stormwater remediation. So DOEE was brought in to evaluate the rest of the park and come up with a plan to help with the remediation of the stormwater. And $4,500 was found for the plan for DOEE. I'm sorry, $450,000 was found for DOEE. That was their estimate for the plan. The stormwater was looked at more intensely, and DPR and DGS came up with a 3-phase plan for the stormwater. So in conjunction with the rec center project going forward, the stormwater is kind of on a separate track. So they're going to do the renovation of the rec center, and they're hoping to break ground before this fall and be completed by spring if everything goes according to plan. And the stormwater, phase 1 is going to be instituted probably immediately after or something. And then phase 2 and phase 3 of the stormwater will be based on some of the evaluation from the phase 1 of the stormwater, and additional funding has to be found. So there's some people in the community who want to wait for all the stormwater phases to be completed. I propose we don't wait for that. This project's been going on for 2 years. We need to get the rec center project to continue on the appropriate schedule and to get it completed and deal with the stormwater as it comes after that, because it's separate funding and separate designs and probably contractors. Sorry? And in addition, I don't know if anybody knows, but the rec center is already offline in preparation for the building of the rec center. So we need to get the rec center built. The DPR and DGS and the design team are looking at some slight modifications from the community, but the design really hasn't changed in the past 3-4 meetings. So the meetings have been over 2 years. We need to keep it on schedule. We need to keep going. Any questions?
I talked to Chris at some length today too, or yesterday, about this, because he has some thoughts and comments. And he said that we need to think about this. Time is money, essentially. And the longer we wait to get the project going, we had to have construction going, the more it's going to cost. And if we've got a fixed budget, as we do in this instance of $4.6 million, either we're going to have to cut something out, or we're going to have to go back and look for more money. And I don't think that's a likely possibility. So we get less bang for our buck if we don't go ahead. And Chris was very supportive of that, moving the project forward as well. And so I think the best we can hope for right now is to get DGS and DPR to move forward and take the steps that we think are necessary to finish the project. There are a couple of specific design issues that they're still looking at as a result of the last meeting. And if they can incorporate those and move forward, I think that would be a good thing. But I don't want to prolong this too much longer. Okay, thank you. You offer the...
Just random, because construction costs increase every year, and if we have $4.5 or $4.6 million budgeted now, 2 years from now, that's not going to get us as much as it would today as costs increase. That's what you're saying. Got it. Okay. Makes sense.
Randy was kind enough to write up a resolution that contained the whole history of the process we've gone through so far for this Recreation Center modernization. So the important part is basically number 8, the last paragraph. And so the commission is, it also talked about the cost of the project every year. The costs are going up so that it's going to cost us more and more. So the very last paragraph says, DPR and DGS have conducted extensive community outreach through surveys and meetings. They have made changes to the design to accommodate the community's comments and suggestions. The Commission supports and strongly agrees that DPR and DGS should continue to move forward and complete the planned scope of work for the Recreation Center project in a timely manner within the authorized budget and without waiting for the funding in future phases of the stormwater remediation that is remaining in the areas of the park. So that's the resolution with the history before that.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? 6-0. Okay, still no word from Davis. Okay, well, maybe next September, maybe September. We'd like to give him a tribute. Okay, the commission business. Thunderstorm crash. The minutes for our July 8th meeting were posted on our website and on the community listserv as well as other listservs. Are there any modifications or changes that need to be made in the minutes? All those in favor? 6-0. Shanna, you have any checks?
One check.
Put your mic on.
Okay, go off that time. No gremlins. One check from Verizon, as per Alan and Stephanie, for $142.30. Then we have that was it.
Okay, all those in favor of approving that check? 6-0. Okay. You want to talk about the quarterly report?
Yes.
No, you have one more on that too.
Actually, I have one listed and...
Where's the piece of paper I gave you?
Yes, this is it.
Well, what about the top line?
Yes, that's what Randy was referencing, the quarterly report amount.
No.
The
We
top
got
line.
another allotment. The second one
Yes.
is month of July.
Yes.
We have 2 in July.
Yes, this is wonderful news. As for Alan and the due diligence, thank you, Alan. This was here. I thought this was what Randy was referencing when he receipt of the second quarterly allotment during July 2019. As per Alan and Stephanie, it was $3,997.96. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then you want to talk about the quarterly report or the financial report?
As you see in your packet, here from Alan, we received the June 19th quarterly financial report. Are there any things that you think we need to highlight, Alan, in terms of?
I wish to only highlight the last page, which is the budget page. It's not their form because their budget report had too many errors in it. So I went back and redid the budget page similar to what I did 5, 6 years ago or something like that. I just put it into this year. This budget page has started from the right amount and ends with the right amount and has the expenses and receipts in the right places.
Are they going to yell at you about that?
Huh?
Are they going to yell at you about that?
No.
Just check.
If they do, I'll yell back.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the quarterly report?
I so move.
All those in favor? 6-0. Oh, we're very okay. A, we have a proposal for a purchase to make.
Yes, I mentioned this on July 8th, but I think it would be helpful if we had a whiteboard on a tripod for people to sign up when they wish to speak. Perhaps this meeting is not the best example given the number of speakers, but sometimes we have a lot of speakers who want to speak, and they may have some doubts, honestly, about whether they're going to have a turn or whether they're really on the list, where the list might be. It would also mean that Stephanie or Alan does not have to go back to the back table and get the list and bring it to us and put it back. So what I'm envisioning, whiteboard right over here by the microphone and the stand, people would sign their name up under an issue. We know how many people want to speak, and then we can allot the time as needed. I checked with the staff here. There is not a whiteboard on the premises. It would cost about $70 from Amazon, and I think you can fold it up so it'd be pretty easy to store in the office, I think against the wall. So propose that we spend $70 to buy a whiteboard.
Is there a second?
I would just suggest to some big clips, so if we wanted to do a flip chart on it, we could attach a flip chart.
Could we maybe say, should we say $100 for paper and whiteboard?
Well, yeah, but you know, they need to be clips, so.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, the one I looked at has like a clipping function.
Okay, all those in favor of approving that purchase? 6-0. Okay. Right now I have really no items for our September 9th meeting other than discussion of the community center modernization, because I think by then hopefully we'll have a little bit more information and we'll be ready to proceed perhaps with talking about the first design meeting. And Chris will be back by then too. Okay, anything else we need to cover tonight? This was a record-setting meeting, an hour and 5 minutes. Okay, thank you very much.